The raw slap of winter air across my cheek was the first thing that registered, sharp and unforgiving. It bit through the thin, expensive silk of the dress I was wearing. A cruel irony. My mind was still a hazy kaleidoscope of corporate reports, looming deadlines, and the acrid smell of burnt coffee from my last life office. But the icy shock quickly wrestled me into a harsh reality. A woman's high-pitched wail sliced through the frigid silence, a desperate, broken sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. It was a sound I belatedly recognized as my own, or rather the sound welling up from the throat of the body I now inhabited. My eyes fluttered open to a scene that felt both intimately familiar and utterly alien. I stood on the polished marble steps of a sprawling mansion, each grey vein in the stone a frozen river of disdain. Beside me, a heavy, ornate door, black as a guilty conscience, slammed shut with a resounding thud that echoed in the cavernous space between my ears. The sound felt final, irrevocable. "Get out, Elise! You are no longer a Vance!" The words were spoken with chilling precision, their resonance still hanging in the air, though the speaker, a stern-faced man whose tailored suit seemed to hum with suppressed rage, was already a blur behind the glass. His face, etched with a disdain so potent it could curdle milk, swam before my vision. Then came the true gut punch. "You leave with nothing. Nothing at all." My hands, surprisingly delicate and manicured, clenched into fists, the fingernails digging into my palms. But the pain wasn't just physical. It was the deep, gnawing despair radiating from this body, a primal scream of rejection that resonated with the novel's tragic false daughter. Elise Vance. The name tasted like ash. My consciousness, sharp and honed from decades of cutthroat business dealings in another life, snapped into focus. This was it. The end of Elise Vance's pathetic charade. The moment she was cast out, penniless and disgraced, into the unforgiving world. I remembered the novel, The False Rose's Thorn. My young assistant was ranting about it while massaging my shoulders. A sugary confection of a story where the sweet, genuine, real daughter triumphantly reclaimed her place, and the manipulative false daughter, Elise, paid for her sins. Elise, who had plotted and schemed, whose fragile delusion of grandeur had led her to inflict petty cruelties and grand betrayals. In the novel, Elise had simply faded, a cautionary tale, a footnote. She walked away with nothing, the victim of her own misguided ambition. And now, I was walking in her shoes, or rather her ridiculously expensive but currently utterly useless silk-covered feet. I looked down. A small, ridiculously ornate handbag lay discarded at my feet, its clasp broken, a few scattered coins and a crumbled tissue within. Nothing. They hadn't been exaggerating. Not even a credit card, nor a discreet wad of cash. Just the elegant dress, the impractical shoes, and the biting wind that seemed to mock my past life's comfortable, climate-controlled existence. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, ran down my spine. The smell of petrichor, sharp and earthy, filled my nostrils as a cold drizzle began to fall, turning the manicured lawn into a slick, dark expanse. The heavy, sweet scent of the gardenias that lined the path, meant to be a welcoming perfume, now felt like a final, mocking goodbye. My brain, usually a whirring engine of strategy and calculation, felt momentarily jammed. Disorientation warred with a rising tide of fury. Nothing. Elise Vance had been stupid, weak. Her brains were traded away for beauty. She had banked her entire existence on a lie, on the fragile hope of inherited wealth, and when that lie shattered, she crumbled. But I was different than her. I had built an empire from less than nothing. I had started with an idea, an empty bank account, and a relentless drive that refused to acknowledge defeat. My past life, a tapestry woven from shrewd investments, ruthless negotiations, and an almost pathological aversion to failure, surged through me. My hands, still fisted, began to tremble, but it wasn't fear. It was the spark of an old flame, igniting fiercely, ruthlessly, burning away the last vestiges of Elise's weaknesses. The rain began to intensify, cold droplets plastering strands of dark hair to my face. The silk of the dress, once a symbol of privilege, now felt thin and inadequate, clinging uncomfortably to my skin, weighing me down. My stomach, Elise's stomach, rumbled pathetically, a sharp contrast to the luxurious meals I was accustomed to. A wave of exhaustion, so profound it made my knees buckle, washed over me. This body, used to pampered indolence, was clearly not accustomed to stress. I took a deep, ragged breath, the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke filling my lungs. Nothing, I whispered to the frigid air, picturing the stern, unyielding faces of the Vance family. Lord Vance, with his cold, bottomless eyes, and Lady Vance, whose feigned sorrow was a transparent veil over her smug relief that the impostor was finally gone. Right, they called patriarchs, matriarchs, and chairmen lords and ladies in this world. And Isabella, the true daughter, whose gentle facade hid a core of steel, needed to reclaim her birthright. She watched my downfall with a cold, satisfied glint in her eye. Perhaps she was justified in feeling that. They had judged Elise with righteous fury and, from the novel's perspective, deservedly so. She had been a nuisance, a shadow. But they had miscalculated. They hadn't exiled a defeated girl. They had inadvertently unleashed me, a titan. My eyes narrowed, scanning the darkening street. No car. Of course not. They expected me to walk away, to disappear into the abyss they'd created for me. A grim smile touched my lips, a bitter taste blooming in my mouth. Let them think that. Let them bask in their righteous victory. They had tossed aside a delicate, useless doll, but what they had truly done was discard the chrysalis, unaware that the creature emerging from it would be far sharper, far more predatory than anything they could comprehend. The first step was always the hardest. I inhaled deeply, ignoring the tremor in my legs. My past self would have laughed at this body's weakness, but I pushed it down. Survival was paramount. I needed to move, needed to think. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the falling rain. The world felt overwhelmingly large and uncaring, but within me, a familiar stir of defiance began to pulse. I had faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, and betrayals far greater than this. This was just another challenge, a reset, and I had always excelled at resets. My gaze fell upon a glint of metal near a rose bush by the path. A single silver hairpin, intricately carved, had fallen from my hair during the earlier, melodramatic struggle. I bent down, retrieving it. It was cheap, probably mass-produced costume jewelry, but it had a certain sparkle. I held it between my fingers, feeling its cool, smooth surface. It was a tangible object, a solitary possession in a world where I was now truly alone. I could pawn it, maybe, get a meal, a bus ticket. It wasn't much, but it was something. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the pathetic shivers again. This body was soft, unconditioned. That would have to change. My mind was already racing, sifting through memories of Elise's limited knowledge where the nearest bus stop was, the approximate exchange rate, the current societal norms. It was a paltry database compared to my past life's vast compendium of economic data and strategic frameworks. But it was a start. The past, Elise would have dissolved into tears, begged, pleaded. But the new Elise, the old me, merely adjusted her posture, pulling her shoulders back, squaring her chin. The rain was getting heavier, blurring the grand facade of the Vance mansion until it was just a monstrous silhouette against the bruised sky. I turned my back on it, the taste of rain on my lips cold and clean. The sound of my own footsteps, sloshing in puddles, was the only accompaniment to the grinding gears of my newly awakened mind. I needed shelter first, then food, then a plan. A proper, multi-phase, brutally effective plan. The kind that reshaped industries and broke competitors. I would build my empire, brick by painful brick, just as I had done before. And this time, it wouldn't be built on lies, but on sheer, unadulterated strength. Months after that first night blurred into a relentless, exhausting but exhilarating march. The initial days were a stark contrast to the life of luxury Elise had known. I pawned the hairpin for a pittance, enough for stale bread and a night in a grimy hostel where the air hung heavy with the smell of mold and desperation. My delicate hands, once pristine, became calloused. My silk dress was traded for practical, durable clothing bought from a second-hand shop, the faint scent of mothballs clinging to the rough fabric a constant reminder of my fallen status. My first real break came from an unexpected source, Elise's latent artistic talent. The novel had mentioned her being a mediocre painter, dabbling in watercolors, a pastime of the idle rich. But I, possessing a keen eye for aesthetics and a pragmatism that turned every skill into an asset, saw potential. My old self never had time for art in the later parts of my life, but I used to dabble in it when I began my career. Now, I had time, though even that seemed fleeting. I started by sketching portraits on the street for tourists, my fingers stiff with cold, but my gaze sharp, capturing the essence of each passerby with a speed and accuracy that surprised even myself. The meager earnings were meticulously saved, each coin a tiny victory. Working late into the nights, fueled by cheap coffee and an unyielding will, I studied. I used a public library's ancient computers to devour market trends, financial news, technological advancements. My past life's foundation in finance and tech proved invaluable. I recognized nascent opportunities, spotted gaps in the market that Elise's pampered brain would never have registered. The world of this novel was slightly different, a parallel reality with its own quirks, but the fundamental principles of business remained steadfast. Innovation, scalability, ruthless efficiency, and a cold, steady hand to seize all of it by the throat, never letting go. My first major venture was a small, independent online platform for artisanal goods. Not just any goods, but ethically sourced, sustainable luxury items. I saw the growing market for conscious consumption, the desire for uniqueness beyond mass production. I leveraged my artistic eye to curate the most stunning pieces, my past life's marketing genius to craft compelling narratives around each artisan. I worked mercilessly, connecting with small producers in remote villages, negotiating fair prices, building trust, and creating a community around quality and integrity. The rough texture of cheap phone screens became familiar under my fingertips, their faint glow often the only light in my rented room as I hammered out contracts and designed marketing campaigns. The early days were a blur of sleepless nights and constant uncertainty. The faint tang of cheap ramen was often my dinner. The metallic tang of pennies saved my only comfort. There were moments of doubt, when the sheer magnitude of starting from zero threatened to overwhelm me. But the memory of the Vance mansion, the cruel, dismissive faces, acted like a potent tonic. It had been a lifetime since anyone had looked down at me like that, and I admit that it stung. They had cast me out with nothing. I would show them what nothing could build. My new business, creatively named Ethel, for nobility that I wanted for myself, experienced explosive growth. Word spread like wildfire. Athel became synonymous with ethical luxury, with unique pieces that told a story. My profits were reinvested aggressively, expanding into tech-driven solutions for supply chain transparency, then into eco-friendly manufacturing, always anticipating the next trend. The smell of freshly printed blueprints became the scent of hope, the hum of servers, the symphony of my burgeoning power. My aesthetic evolved. I still appreciated beauty, but it was now a beauty born of function and strength, not delicate frivolity. My clothes were impeccably tailored, not for show, but for pure authority. My posture, once Elise's slumped defeat, was now ramrod straight, radiating confidence. My voice, previously a timid whisper, became clear and resonant, capable of commanding boardrooms. My touch, once the soft caress of a pampered hand, gained the firm, reassuring grip of a leader. As Athel's reach expanded, so did my personal legend. The business world, initially dismissive of a newcomer, soon whispered my name with a mix of awe and trepidation. The Phoenix entrepreneur, they called me, speaking of my meteoric rise from obscurity, unaware of the true Phoenix rising from Elise Vance's ashes. The media tried to dig into my past, but Elise Vance had been meticulously erased. No digital footprint, no social media presence. The false daughter was truly gone, replaced by a self-made woman whose history was meticulously curated to begin with Ethel. The Vance family, of course, was oblivious for years. Their world, cocooned in old money and fading prestige, moved slower. They were focused on maintaining their illusions, on propping up the mediocre ventures of their actual daughter, Isabella. Isabella, who, despite her supposedly sweet and genuine nature, lacked the killer business instinct needed to save a declining legacy. The Vance empire, built on outdated industries, was slowly but surely bleeding out. The first hint of their awareness came subtly. Whispers at charity galas, misplaced glances from distant acquaintances, a shared contact mentioning that impressive new entrepreneur, Elise, then catching themselves confused. I watched it unfold with a detached amusement, like observing a slow-motion car crash. They couldn't connect the dot. How could the disgraced, penniless girl they tossed aside be the formidable magnate reshaping the market? Then came the formal invitations. Initially, they were veiled from mutual business associates, hoping to broker an introduction without admitting they recognized me. I ignored them all. My empire was mine, and I had no desire to mingle with the ghosts of my past. The bitter taste of their past rejection still lingered, and I saw no reason to sweeten it. The invitations grew more direct. An official request for a collaboration with Vance Corp. A formal dinner invitation from Lord Vance himself, extended through a mutual prestigious bank. I still declined, my assistant politely citing scheduling conflicts. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted, and they felt it, even if they hadn't fully acknowledged it. The scent of their desperation finally reached me in a discreet private communication. A request for a meeting signed personally by Lord Vance, hinting at matters of mutual importance regarding the future of our respective concerns. It was less an invitation, more a plea, thinly disguised as professional courtesy. The paper was heavy, expensive, but the words felt brittle. I stared at the signature, a flourish I remembered from the fictional accounts of the Vances. A flicker of something akin to pity, quickly extinguished, passed through me. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford, not even for those who had once held my life in their hands. I finally agreed to a meeting, not out of nostalgia or a desire for reconciliation, but out of a calculated curiosity. I wanted to see their faces, to witness the dawning realization. the confirmation of their folly. It would be my private, unspoken triumph. I chose a neutral territory, a high-end private dining room in a skyscraper overlooking the city, a place where my power was palpable, where the muted hum of my own success resonated in the polished silence. The panoramic view of the sprawling metropolis, a testament to my ambition, served as a silent backdrop. Lord Vance and Lady Vance arrived precisely on time, their entrance hesitant, their usual aura of aristocratic confidence noticeably dimmed. A hush fell over the room as my assistant escorted them in. Lord Vance, once so formidable and now looked somewhat gaunt, his carefully tailored suit betraying a subtle stiffness that spoke of old worries. Lady Vance, her face more lined than I remembered, clutched a silk purse, her eyes darting nervously around the minimalist but opulent space. The faint, sweet smell of her familiar perfume, rose and sandalwood, invoked no sentimentality in me, only a brief, clinical analysis of its fading popularity. They paused upon seeing me, already seated at the head of the polished oak table, a single, perfectly brewed cup of green tea before me. My attire was simple, a charcoal suit custom-made to fit my now lean frame, exuding quiet authority, with one button revealing a silk, expensive blouse beneath it. My hair was styled simply, pulled back from my face, revealing the sharp planes of my cheekbones, the determined set of my jaw. The only jewelry I wore was a sleek silver watch, a gift from my first major investor, whose weight felt solid and grounding on my wrist. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows caught the faint gleam of the silver hairpin I'd bought years ago, subtly woven into my bun, a private token of my true beginning. "Long time no see," I said calmly, but my gaze was aimed at the chairs opposite me. Their eyes widened, then narrowed, battling between recognition and disbelief. The gasp that escaped Lady Vance was barely audible, a fragile sound that fractured the polite silence. Lord Vance's jaw tightened, his gaze sweeping over my poised figure. Then the cityscape behind me, a silent admission of my dominion. "Elise," Lady Vance's voice was a shaky whisper, laced with a mix of shock and something that almost sounded like tentative hope. The way she said the name, laced with a familiar pity from the old novel, was an arrow dipped in poison. I simply inclined my head in neutral gesture. "Lord Vance, Lady Vance, thank you for coming." My voice, though calm, held an undercurrent of steel. It was not the tremulous, pleading voice of the girl they had cast out. It was the voice of a CEO, a titan. They took their seats opposite me, their movements stiff, uncomfortable. The air in the room, usually temperate, felt thick, heavy with unspoken histories. A plate of delicate pastries lay untouched on the table between us. The faint, refined scent of French baking, usually tempting, now felt superfluous, irrelevant to the raw tension. "Elise, we were so worried about you," Lady Vance began, her voice gaining a forced warmth, a theatrical sincerity that grated on my ears. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, betrayed the lie. Lord Vance cleared his throat. "Indeed, Elise, after so many years, your sudden disappearance troubled us greatly. We tried to find you, of course." The lie was even more transparent in his gruff tone. They hadn't tried, they had celebrated. A small, mirthless smile touched my lips. "Did you? I found no evidence of it." My eyes met his, cold and direct. His gaze flinched, shifting uncomfortably. The faint metallic tang of old shame, or perhaps just discomfort, hung in the air. "We understand you've done remarkably well for yourself," Lord Vance continued, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Athel is quite the achievement, truly impressive. It is, I agreed, my voice devoid of emotion. It is entirely my own achievement. Their initial pleasantries were a thin veneer over their true intentions. I sensed it, could almost taste the desperation emanating from them. Lady Vance's eyes, still trying to reconcile the powerful woman before her with the broken girl she remembered, shimmered with what might have been unshed tears. Elise, dear, we've made so many mistakes. We were hasty, unjust. Isabella, she truly missed you after a while. Ah, Isabella, the real daughter, always the fulcrum of their universe, the one whose supposed loneliness now conveniently served their purpose. Hasty? I repeated, my voice low, dangerous. Unjust? I leaned forward slightly, my gaze sweeping over their faces, seeing the faint lines of worry, the slight slump of their shoulders, the weariness that financial strain could inflict even on the proudest. You expelled me from your home. You stripped me of everything, right down to the last penny, knowing full well I had nowhere to go, no support, no resources. You left me on the street to fend for myself, a young woman with no experience of the real world. Each word was a precise surgical cut. My voice remained steady, but the cold edge in it was unmistakable. The memory of the biting wind, the wet street, the empty stomach, was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. The cheap mothball scent of my first second-hand dress still haunted the edges of my memory. Lady Vance gasped again, a more theatrical sound this time. No, Elise, darling, it wasn't like that. We thought you would surely have someone else to turn to, a friend, a distant relative. Her excuses were pathetic, paper thin. You thought I would simply disappear, I corrected her softly, but the impact was like a hammer blow. You hoped I would disappear, that the nuisance, the stain on your purified family lineage would simply cease to exist the moment she stepped out your doors. Lord Vance shifted uneasily, his face pale from my words. Elise, what's past is past. We are here to offer an olive branch, to try to heal the wounds. Vance Corp is facing some challenges, and your expertise, your unique vision would be invaluable. We could merge. You could have a significant stake. Rejoin your family, truly. He finally laid his cards on the table, the mercenary plea thinly veiled by the promise of family. I listened, my expression unreadable. Merge? Rejoin my family? The words tasted like bile. They wanted to graft their dying branch onto my thriving tree. They wanted to legitimize their declining name by attaching it to my ascending star. They wanted me to save them after casting me aside. The memory of their harsh, unfeeling faces that bitter winter evening came flooding back, clear as day. The absolute indifference in their eyes as the door slammed shut. The chilling finality of the word nothing. I took a slow sip of my tea, savoring the bitter notes of the green leaves. The warmth spread through my throat, a stark contrast to the coldness building in my chest. I placed the cup back down with a soft, deliberate click, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. My gaze, calm and unwavering, locked onto Lord Vance, then Lady Vance. Let me be clear, I began, my voice clear and ringing with an immutable authority. You speak of healing wounds, but what wounds did you sustain? You were rid of a problem. You went on with your lives basking in your supposed righteousness. You forgot about the girl you cast out, didn't you? The question hung in the air, unanswered because the answer was painfully obvious. You never cared if I lived or died. Lady Vance finally broke, a sob escaping her lips. Elise, please, we're your family. My family, I echoed, the words laced with a cutting irony. I rose slowly from my chair, my movements fluid and powerful, my shadow stretching long and imposing across the polished floor. I walked to the window, gazing out at the vast city, the symbol of my conquest. If I didn't make it, I said, my voice low now, almost a whisper, but carrying more weight than any shout, you wouldn't bother with whether I lived or died after you kicked me out. You know why I haven't gone back to you, to grovel or ask you to look upon me again. I committed many sins against you, your daughter, and I paid the price. Now I owe you nothing. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. The air prickled with a sharp, undeniable truth. I turned from the window, facing them again, my expression unyielding. The tears on Lady Vance's face, the defeated slump of Lord Vance's shoulders, meant nothing to me. They were acting out of self-preservation, not genuine remorse. The price I paid, I continued, was years of hardship, of struggle, of building everything meticulously from the ground up with nothing but my own 2 hands and my intellect. The sins of Elise Vance are gone. The payment was exacted upon me, the one who inherited her broken life. And I have paid it in full. More than in full. I have forged a new path, a new identity, a new legacy, one that owes nothing to your name, your money, or your fleeting affections. My gaze remained fixed on them, cold, analytical, devoid of any warmth. You wanted nothing to do with Elise Vance then, and I, the woman standing before you, want nothing to do with the Vance family now. Your challenges are yours to solve. Your declining fortunes are the consequence of your own choices. I will not be your lifeline. I will not be your redemption. I walked back to the table, picking up my teacup. The cool ceramic felt good in my hand. This meeting is concluded, I stated, my voice firm, leaving no room for argument. My assistant will show you out. Lord Vance finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. There was a raw, naked despair in them now, a dawning comprehension of the magnitude of their loss. He had thrown away a diamond, thinking it was a pebble. He had discarded potential, only to see it bloom into something magnificent, far beyond his reach. Perhaps he did make the correct call, but now it was too late. He gave a small, defeated nod. Lady Vance merely continued to weep silently, her shoulders shaking. They rose, their movements slow and heavy, like people carrying an immense, invisible burden. As they passed me, heading towards the door my burly assistant now held open, Lord Vance paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. He simply looked at me, a stranger in every sense that mattered, and then followed his wife out of the room. I sat back in my chair. They never apologized once that whole time. They only saw my success and coveted it. Another slender, beautiful assistant, an acquired habit from my last life, entered in after they left, already beginning to pamper me with shoulder rubs after my supposed tough meeting. The heavy door, closing behind them, was not a final slam this time, but a soft click, a gentle severance. It was an end without fanfare, a quiet conclusion to a chapter I had fought relentlessly to close. I was no longer Elise Vance, the false daughter, the disgraced imposter. I was the architect of my own destiny, the empress of my own domain. The city outside stretched endlessly, a testament to endless possibilities. And for the first time, in this body, I felt truly, utterly free. And now I had a whole life ahead of me to live in success and in the light.